all your stuff. What can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Hi, what's up?
Hey, happy Valentine's Day, Teresa.
Oh, that's so funny because I'm going to say don't say happy Valentine's Day because that's how I'm ending my bummer of a story. But happy Valentine's Day. Yeah, it's Valentine's Day and I'm off. I was off yesterday. I'm off tomorrow. I mean, I'm not off tomorrow. I have 9 hours of class, but I don't have to work too. So that's off enough.
That's about as off as you get right now.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm Claire Patton.
And I'm Teresa Sparks, and this is the podcast.
It Chooses You.
We talk about stories, ideas, and delights, and we make each other laugh. And we make you laugh, we hope. Hi.
So just to fill everybody in, Teresa had an episode planned for today.
In the chamber.
It was ready. It wasn't even planned. It was ready to go. And I'm very excited about it. It's a topic that I have heard her discuss, and I'm excited to hear her do a full episode on. There were some disagreements between her and I yesterday as far as what the format and content of that episode should be. So it has now been postponed, but the long and short of it is we had a fight yesterday.
Yeah, Teresa screamed and cried. Claire parented. And now here we are with a different story today. I just wanted to thank you again for yesterday. I, of course, still think I'm right, but also my rightness is not the point. And after 15 minutes of, I say tantrum when I mean to myself, but really just like overwhelming negative emotions that make me want to hit is sort of more specific and accurate. And it's interesting. I realized after that the reason that triggered a tantrum is because I really care about the story and I've done a really good write-up of it and it took a long time.
I believe it.
The more invested I am in the creative product, the more I'm like, no, it has to be this way. So that's a really interesting lesson for me to learn. Thank you. Yeah. I was like, oh, so this thing I do where, oh, it's fine. Everything's fine. We'll do whatever. Oh, it'll be good no matter what. That is all about like not getting invested enough to actually want to fight about something.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I need to take the investment and the engagement that makes me want to fight about something and just figure out how to do that without the fight.
Right.
So, yeah.
I hear you. I know about all that, those emotions.
Yeah. Well, and you were great because you did exactly what someone who has experience with that does, which is like, here are the options. Like, let's stay solution focused. Here are some options.
That felt important to me.
Yeah, you did a really good job of it. Yeah, it was awesome. I was like, oh, that's exactly what needed to happen. Thank you, Claire. Yeah, because I was like, I don't even know what the options are. I just need to swaddle myself and huddle in a corner.
I just need to rage for a minute.
That's right. Rage! What's going on with you? How's your day?
I sent you a picture of the bagels I made this morning.
Yeah.
First time making bagels.
It looks beautiful.
They were pretty on point, I have to say. It's not hard to do. Yeah. It takes planning. Yeah. You know, and my dad was a New Yorker, and I think he'd be proud.
Nice. These bagels are from my dad. Well, I looked at them and I was like, they look crispy on the outside, chewy on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's all about actually restricting the rise. That's why you boil them before you bake them, because you get that chewiness from the tension between it trying to rise and not quite being able to.
So yesterday was entirely about implementing constraint for you and seeing what beauty comes out of it. Beauty and deliciousness. You know what? You're like, I'm a container, motherfuckers. You can go this far, no further. What are you going to do about it?
Yesterday, I was a bagel.
That's awesome.
Today, I am full of bagels.
Nice. Yeah, it looks like you made what? Did you make a dozen or?
I made a dozen. The picture I sent you was only 6, but they are great. I will be eating them again for lunch.
They look beautiful. Yeah, I have. It's been very cold here in Colorado. We finally have winter.
Yeah.
And I've been eating a lot, just a lot, just of whatever's around. I went for several weeks of not really feeling like I needed to eat at all to, I definitely need a third sandwich for lunch. So
don't you feel like when people talk about the misery of winter in Chicago, this is what they're talking about? Just several days of freezing temperatures, snow, no sun whatsoever, which is the thing that kills me. Yeah. It looks like you have some sun there. We finally got some this morning, and I feel like a mole coming out of its hole and looking around, squinting. What is that light? That's my mole voice.
Nice. We'll bring that back later. Yeah, it has been sunny, so Longmont hasn't been as gloomy as Weld County, but so cold, and just the wind is bitter. And I take the dogs out, and Murphy really likes the cold, and even Murphy was like, "Fuck this shit, we're going back inside." Like, he was not having it. So
that's when you know it's cold.
That's right. When Murphy won't play, he's just like, "No, I'm here to do my business," and then we are going back inside, and I'm sitting on the couch.
Can you snuggle me and give me another sandwich,
exactly.
please?
This foot is particularly cold. Will you please hold it until it returns to body temperature?
Buddy.
Yeah, he's so sweet. In his cone of shame. Oh, man. Couple more days, he gets his sutures out. So that'll be an exciting day for me because I won't have to manage the cone anymore.
Yeah.
Thrilled for that.
For the owner. It's a thing.
The cone of difficulty.
Cone of annoyance,
yeah.
right.
This might actually be the cone of Dunshire. This might be what they were talking about. He's fine with it. He's like, yeah, sure, off on, whatever. I'm just like, oh my God, I gotta take this thing off and put it back on again. One more thing to do. Don't they know I'm busy fighting with Claire? I don't have time for this shit. Murphy's like, I don't care. I don't need to wear it. I'm like, you do though, because I paid a lot of money for those sutures. And I would like them to not be infected. So it's great though. Like his, there's a certain dog resilience with injury and illness. Because, like, if he doesn't feel bad internally, right? And he doesn't have any pain from the sutures. He was on very nice drugs for a week. And so he just doesn't care. He's like, I'm fine. No, really, I'm fine. Because, like, their bar for life is good is so low.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't need a lot. He's like, my body mostly works. I can poop unaided. Life is sweet. Let's go play. It's really inspiring, actually.
I think dogs are great that way.
How are your puppies like in the snow?
My dog Sage loves the snow, but has been going out, getting 2 feet away from the porch and just jumping back inside. She can't. Her friend has been here all week, the other dog that lives out here, and they haven't been playing because no one, including us, wants to go outside. So this morning she had about a 15-minute rager run around and barking session. So she's good now. She'll be good for another day.
Describing it as a rager seems very accurate. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There was something the other night, not about the snow, because the snow has been pretty minimal, at least here, but the cold. My friend Jason used to say a thing. He's like, the difference between a snowstorm and a blizzard is that when you're in a snowstorm, you think, oh my God, we're in a blizzard. And when you're in a blizzard, you think, oh my God, we're going to die.
Right.
And that's what the cold has been like. It's like, this is dangerous. This is physically dangerous cold. Yeah. I think it was a degree yesterday in the middle of the day.
I think the high today is -4 out here.
Yeah. See, that ain't right. That's not. Nope.
That's when you're like, Mother Nature's. She may be trying to rid herself of us.
She's like, you know what? I got one icy blast left in me this year. Let's see what I can do to Colorado.
And my understanding is most of the country is under these conditions. Even my family. It's snowing in Texas right now. You know, as someone who grew up in Texas, that never happens.
I was going to say it would be better if we were 1,000 miles south, but apparently not.
Not too much better.
Well, my love to Canada then. Best of luck, Alberta.
Alberta forever.
Alberta for life. After our discussion yesterday, in which I cried, I pivoted to my second story that I've been sort of half working on, because it seemed like that was going to be a better option for today. So this is a very quickly put together, but awesome story. So today, I'm going to tell you about Peter Tripp, American DJ, and his Wake-a-thon.
Okay, I don't know this one.
Okay.
But I have already impressions that it's going to be that he's like some cheesy dude, which I love.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe a wake-a-thon is staying awake for a certain period of time, but that's my guess.
Yes, you are 100% correct on both counts. Go you.
I don't even need to hear the story. I already got it.
I've already told myself the story. There's nothing new you can share. So Peter Tripp was born in 1926, and he was a top 40 countdown radio personality in the 50s. In the
50s. So he's been in some Buddy Holly.
Yeah, early rock and roll.
Some what's one of the like dude trios that sings about love, you know?
Sure. I don't know when Frankie Valli was recording. Bill Haley and the Comets, the Penguins, the Chords. It's groups like that.
Yeah.
Bill Haley in the comments is Rock Around the Clock. So
some Elvis Presley too.
Mm-hmm. So rock and roll had begun and was sort of growing throughout the time he was a DJ.
Rock and roll was already freaking out the squares.
That's right. Your parents already hated it. So I have lots of judgments about radio. I do not listen to the radio. And one of the reasons I don't is because the shouty, horrible cheesiness of the top 40 countdown radio dude.
I feel you on that.
But that's who he was, and he was apparently very successful at it. He spent like almost 20 years in broadcasting. He started in Michigan in 1947. So he was 21 in 1947, so he may or may not have been in the war. I didn't find anything about that. He adopted the nickname the bald kid in the third row. Because, of course, you have to have a cheesy nickname, right?
That's not a very good one, though.
Yeah. So
you want something snappy and short, like, I don't know, this is Vinyl Vinny or something like that. But, like, this is the bald kid in the third row. That's just a mouthful,
Yeah. It was apparently a description one of his parents gave him when he was, like, in a row of babies at the hospital. When he was
Okay.
The bald kid in the third row.
And he took that first nickname and just went with it.
Yeah. He heard it then. He was born with amazing ears, and he heard and understood it then. And he's like, that's it. That's going to be my radio personality. So started in Michigan, moved to Kansas City, and then finally got a gig in New York. Woohoo! By this point, he had adjusted his nickname to the curly-headed kid in the third row.
Okay. It was 1959. What do you...
Your sigh is everything. So he's basically a pioneer of this top 40 format. In 1955, he got his dream job at WMGM in New York, and he presented a show, a 3-hour daily top 40 show called Your Hits of the Week. Your Hits of the Week, but it's daily.
Your Hits of the Week with the curly-headed kid in the third row.
That's right. It's not a mouthful at all. They had lots of time then. There was lots of space for narrative and invention. They weren't tied to this incredibly fast rhythm. Okay. He's worked there starting in 1955. And so 4 years later, he's like, you know what I'm going to do for publicity? This is a great idea I've just had, boss. I'm going to stay awake for 200 hours. This is my great plan. And we're going to market the heck out of it. And it's going to be for charity. Isn't this a great idea? And so his station, and he consulted lots of sleep researchers and doctors, and everyone they talked to said, that's a terrible idea. Don't do it.
I like that they consulted experts and then were like, nah.
Yeah. It's called due diligence. You just have to say you asked. You don't actually have to follow the advice you're given.
Were these, because I know a lot of these publicity stunts happened later, especially with charities. Was this a common practice at the time, or was he sort of pioneering something as far as marketing goes?
I don't know about whether he was a pioneer for this kind of marketing, but I think you're right that this like stunt-based advertising started to become popular then. Because we talked about last year, Donald Crowhurst sort of 10 years after this doing a stunt basically for publicity and media, whatever. So I think he's definitely on the start of the wave.
He's the first wave in stunt publicity. Yeah.
Well, and people stunt publicity in like a modern media environment. I think stunt publicity has always worked. Like there's a poster of a bearded lady outside of your circus, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to go see that.
Right. Well, and we just talked last week about kids riding an elephant and a donkey from New York to DC, supposedly, for
That's
publicity.
Right.
So
yeah, the American public loves a piece of theater.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll go see that. They said it was a terrible idea, and he said back to them, it's 1959 and I'm a 36-year-old white man. Science does not apply to me.
Right.
So he's like, so we're going to do it. But in a concession to common sense, we will have sleep researchers, doctors, scientists monitoring me the whole time.
Okay.
Like doing cognitive tests and blood pressure or whatever. Basic, is he still alive? Kind of questions. These doctors who were on hand, they had a couple different jobs. One was to keep him awake by presumably poking him with a stick or something. Or talking to him. And two, make sure he didn't die in public because he set up, I'm just guessing at that second one, obviously. That wasn't written down anywhere.
I like it though.
But he set himself up in a glass booth in Times Square. And he was just going to do his daily radio show and just be awake the rest of the time in a glass box in Times Square.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm just doing some quick math here. So we're talking about more or less 8 days he was going to stay awake.
That's right. The doctors, I think, this is of course my editorializing, but the doctors kind of shrugged and were like, well, if he's going to do this incredibly stupid thing, at least we can try and learn from it. Researchers took shifts, basically, sitting with him and interacting with him to keep him out of physical danger, keep him from sleeping. But keeping him out of danger and keep him from sleeping are contradictory, and those were their 2 jobs. So science is messy, you guys. Science gets messy sometimes. On a cold January morning, Tripp set up his broadcasting gear, which is not exactly right. That makes him sound like he's pump up the volume. He was at a really popular and high listenership radio station. But he set up his broadcasting gear in this booth and started the Wake-a-thon. And I guess he was just going to hang out for the rest of the time. He basically worked 3 hours a day. And so I don't know if he had entertainment or if he was just chatting with people or what the deal was the rest of the time.
Yeah, I mean, beyond stupid, this sounds a little bit boring.
Yeah, and it just, I mean, it sounds horrible. It sounds like a horrible thing to do to yourself. But, you know, fun now to talk about. So I guess thanks.
Right.
Thanks, Peter. This is what's cool, though, okay? He was able to do his show fairly well for about the first 4 days.
Wow.
He kept up that noxious top 40 DJ patter. He played the records. But outside of the show, he kind of started to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
On the 3rd day, he started being abusive to his colleagues. Yelling, screaming, maybe even hitting at this point. After 100 hours awake, he wasn't able to get through simple math problems anymore, nor could he recite the alphabet. After 120 hours, the hallucinations started. He thought he saw spiders crawling in his shoes and mice running around him. When he went to a hotel room nearby to shower and change, he saw flames shooting out of an open dresser drawer. And at first, he thought that the scientists had set the fire, like to test him somehow. But then he couldn't give a reason why he thought they would have done that.
Right. Is the answer because I am sleep deprived and paranoid now?
Yeah. Well, it could be. After that, he began believing that the scientists wanted to frame him for a crime and that they were conspiring to ruin him. And I feel it. Like, I'm somebody who becomes a weeping, angry mess when I don't get enough sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand that feeling of like, I feel terrible, and whoever is closest to me, it's your fault.
Right.
You're the one doing this to me.
Well, here's a question for you, and maybe there's an answer, maybe there isn't.
Yeah.
Do you think that, whoever's in charge, the radio executives, I assume, had a conversation where they're like, hey, how bad does it have to get before we call this off? Do you know what I mean? Like,
what's your safe word, Peter?
Yeah. He's just rocking in the corner going, kumquat, kumquat.
No one's listening to my kumquat. I would imagine not. I would imagine that, like, how do we call this off safely was not an option.
Yeah, probably not.
That's just how I conceive of that particular brand of American masculinity, maybe. But yeah, no way out. No way out. Like, the hallucinations continued, and much later he believed that one of the scientists checking on him was an undertaker who had come to bury him alive. And he ran away into the street to get away from this guy.
I don't know what's worse, that this guy is going through this or that he's doing it to himself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I have lots of questions, but I think you and I are very firmly in the "that's crazy, why would you do it" camp, right? Those sort of extremes of experience were just like, huh, that's what gets you going, huh? All right, well, have fun with that. We're gonna make bagels and eat them and play video games.
Yeah, creativity takes many forms.
I love your insistence that there's something magical and creative in him that was just trying to express itself in this way.
I absolutely do not insist that.
Okay. I got really excited. I was like, wow, that's amazing. How did you get there?
I think this would fall in the destructive rather than creative camp, probably.
Yeah. Well, and, I think very clearly done for charity, right? But also done for publicity for the radio station.
Absolutely.
That people will do crazy things to get famous, Claire. By day 8, he couldn't tell what was real and what was delusion. Full stop. Just had no idea.
So was he managing to still DJ through all of this?
Yeah, I think he actually did his show the whole time. I can find no evidence that he stopped.
Oh my gosh, that must have been a trip. to listen to.
Well, and also a Tripp. Ha, ha, ha.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even see, it's the puns that sneak up on you that are the most dangerous. The silent pun is the most deadly. I keep thinking he must have been, at this point, he had been in the business for 12 years or something, or he must have just been so used to doing that when the time came to do it, he's like, and now I play this routine. Yeah. And I do this, and I talk like this, and I play these things. And then once that sort of went away, he fell apart again. And I am not a scientist. I don't know anything about neurology, but there is this great story, a collection of stories actually, about people who've lost their long-term memory or access to their long-term memory. And they sort of can't remember more than about a 30-minute loop in their lives. They exist for 30 minutes and then they forget everything and exist again for 30 minutes. And there's some evidence that listening to music actually taps into long-term memory or a different part of processing in the brain. And so I'm wondering if the musical part of what he was doing was actually what kept him from dying, going crazy and dying.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
I don't know as much as I should. I may come back with a book report later. I also need to remind everyone here that sleep deprivation is a form of torture, right? And it's one CIA apparently uses pretty regularly because it leaves no marks on the body. After 2 to 3 days of sleep deprivation, your brain will start sleeping when you're awake, basically. So you're having dreams that you can see, which is just another way of describing psychosis, right? When later psychologists studied the data collected during this publicity stunt / experiment, they realized that his visual hallucinations occurred about every 90 minutes, which is a cycle that mimics the timing of REM sleep.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
REM sleep isn't fully understood even now. Scientific consensus seems to be that it's the time that our brains synthesize data and interpret different sensory input that we've had throughout the day. What is known is that our brains are very active during REM sleep. They're more active than in any other phase of sleep.
Do you remember that Star Trek The Next Generation episode where no one was dreaming?
Yes.
That was a good one.
It was a good one.
They were all going insane because of the benefits of REM sleep and how much we process mentally and emotionally while we're sleeping. They were losing their minds because they couldn't dream. That was maybe my favorite episode.
That reminds me, too, that there's this idea that every day, all day long, we're receiving information, and we actually learn to tune out something like 90% of what we see and perceive because we recognize that it's noise. It's not relevant to keeping the organism alive or entertained in that moment. And so it's like we take it in, but we don't actually notice it. And so this could be, I want to say it's my theory just because I don't want to blame a scientist for the wrong thing I'm about to say. But also I do read enough snippets of things that probably someone has said it. So I'm not trying to take credit away. I'm just, all mistakes are mine here. But REM sleep could be the time where our brain just sorts through all of the quote noise that we took in throughout the day and looks at it to see if some of it might actually be useful in the future.
Yeah.
After a few days, like I said, he was hallucinating. And for the last 66 hours of the wake-a-thon, which is, 2.5 days? 2.5 days. The observing scientists and doctors were giving him Ritalin to help him stay awake.
Oh, God.
I know. Isn't it crazy? And so at this point, I'm like, oh, these scientists were really just, if this fucking guy's going to do this, then we're going to study it because no one's ever going to volunteer to do this again. So give him some amphetamines. Let's keep him up. In the last few hours of the ordeal, he began confiding to scientists that although everyone believed he was Peter Tripp, he actually wasn't Peter Tripp. So full dissociative break. Yeah. I am not myself. So the experiment ends. He's a mess. After he left, he slept for 13 hours and 13 minutes. Still monitored at this point. And he spent most of that time in REM sleep.
Whoa.
His brain is like, finally, a chance to clear out all this shit.
That's not even that. I would have thought he would have slept for 24 hours. 13 hours isn't that much, considering what his body and brain just went through.
I imagine there might have been some overwhelming hunger or, waste relief signals. So, maybe that's why. I think it wasn't like he slept for 13 hours and then got up and went about his normal day. He did take some time to recover.
He slept for 13 hours and then he was fine.
And then he went back to work like a good American. But when he woke, he still thought of himself as an imposter of himself for several days after.
God.
And it's speculated that he had psychological trouble for the rest of his life from this. And then, just a few weeks after he woke up, he was indicted in the Payola Scandal for criminal acts he had committed well before the Wake-a-thon.
What?
Yeah, so now I'm going to tell you about the Payola Scandal.
I was going to say, please tell me about the Payola Scandal.
Yeah. So this is Payola. Some record promoters secured radio play for their artists and albums by paying radio DJs directly for airtime.
Oh.
So it's called the $100 handshake. That phrase can be traced back to Hi Weiss, who is the owner of Old Town Records. And he was known for basically handing out bribes like candy. Back then, it was still legal. He said, this is Weiss, he said, "Why waste time going out with someone you don't like and sit down and have a meal with them when you can't stand them? Just give them the money and let them play the fucking record."
That is direct, I guess.
Very straightforward way of looking at it. Yeah, I quite like it. Some broadcast historians also think that Payola is a supporting reason for the quick rise of rock and roll. If you're getting a nice bribe, maybe you set aside your racism and you play records from black labels and artists. If Payola doesn't sound like a big deal, and you're wondering why there was this scandal and congressional inquiry into it, it's because pay to play, which is what this is called, is how the music industry still works. It's just how things go now. But instead of Hi Weiss paying a DJ like Peter Tripp for airtime for a specific song or album, now Sony pays Clear Channel.
Yep.
It's the same practice. It's just complicated by corporate law and the amount of money changing hands. You can't hand someone $250,000 without some documentation.
I thought you were going to say, now that Payola's over, we actually reward artists for just being good and for people liking their music. But I guess that was naive of me.
I like the sarcasm. I like the hopeful sarcasm. I like that very much.
I'm riding a line here.
When it was just a person and just a guy who worked at a radio station, somehow it's different than when it's Sony paying Clear Channel. And the whole thing reminds me of that Mitch Hedberg joke where he's talking about getting a receipt for a donut. He's like, "I can't imagine a situation in which I'd have to prove I bought a donut. I'll hand you the money, you hand me the donut. We don't need to bring ink and paper into this."
Right.
It's like that. It's like, we don't need to write this down. I'll just hand you $100 and play the fucking album, right? It emerged in this investigation that DJ Peter Tripp had accepted $36,000 in bribes.
Oh my goodness.
Guess how much a house cost at the time?
10,000? I don't know.
Yes, 12,000.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. So he was gifted 3 houses worth of bribes to play certain songs. And despite his claim that he, quote, never took a dime from anyone, which you can't make blanket statements like that in court, sir. That's come on. Never is a problem for your defense team. Unless they're Republicans. Ba-dum, ching.
Nice.
Okay. He was found guilty on a charge of commercial bribery, and he received, wait for his huge punishment. Are you ready? It doesn't even say he had to give the money back, first of all.
Was his huge punishment 10 days sleep deprivation?
In a crazy twist. He jumped the rules of space and time, and he had actually received his punishment before he was indicted for the crime. He received a $500 fine and a 6-month suspended sentence.
Wow.
Was he white? Do you think?
Oh, I'm sure he was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's probably white. Yeah. So it kind of throws new light on his paranoia during the experiment, right? That the scientists monitoring were trying to frame him for a crime.
Yeah. It sounds like there was some real psychological stuff going on there based in some of his own shitty behavior.
Yeah, he jiggled his brain around and look what came out. Paranoia about being prosecuted for a crime that he committed. He was fired from WMGM, the New York radio station, for the Payola thing. He wasn't able to find work as a DJ anymore, basically. He tried to do it in San Francisco. He tried in Los Angeles. Finally, he ended up in Toledo, Ohio. And it just makes me think, he was this incredibly famous, a huge personality in New York City, and he ended up at, WKRP. And so he finally was like, I quit. That's it. I can't do it. I will not be your Johnny Fever. I'm out. Even his Wake-a-thon record didn't endure very long. Dave Hunter, who's another DJ, overtook him pretty quickly. He stayed awake for 225 hours. 6 years after Tripp did it, the record was completely smashed by a high school student who lasted 11 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And he was given a job at a New York radio station.
That's right. And then he took the train to New York and said, I'm here for my job. Tripp returned to LA and sort of wandered from career to career. No judgment of that.
Not here. Not here at It Chooses You.
He did gym sales, he did marketing, he did motivational speaking, he was a stockbroker. It's pretty telling, right? It's not like he wrote a book or started a band. He didn't choose to do creative things. He chose to do sketchy capitalist nonsense. You know? Like, I think marketing, freelance, motivational speaking, and stockbrokering can all be safely classified in the Venn diagram that is capitalist nonsense.
Yes, yes.
So he died at the age of 73 in the year 2000. He had a stroke. He had 2 sons and 2 daughters, and all 4 of his marriages ended in divorce.
Oh.
Happy Valentine's Day!
I love it.
So that's the story of DJ Peter Tripp, his sleep-wake experiment, and the Payola Scandal of 1960.
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you guys so much for listening. You should subscribe to our podcast. You should download our episodes. If you like us, please show us. And that's how. We love you. You can also get in touch with us at itchoosesyouPodcast@gmail.com.
And if you would write a review for us wherever you're getting your podcast, that'll help connect us with other people interested in the types of stories we tell. Thank you all for listening. We will see you
next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Testing? Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyouPodcast@gmail.com.